This is Charlie Mike, the podcast. Veterans helping veterans, talking about things happening in the veteran community, things we've experienced and overcome, such as addictions, PTSD, depression, legal trouble, and we also promote veteran-owned businesses. If you're talking about it, we're talking about it. This is Charlie Mike, the podcast.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining Charlie Mike, the podcast. As always, I'm your host, Raul. Hey, today I got a special guest for y'all. It's Jeremy. Jeremy's the co-founder of the Mighty Oats Foundation, and he's also a United States Marine Corps veteran. So you guys be sure to stay tuned. Check this one out. Jeremy, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, man. Really appreciate it, and really excited to have the conversation. You said it all. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. There's nothing much else to say. That's kind of the end all and be all, right? I mean,
Damn Marine.
I've done a few things since then, but I served as an infantry officer in the Marine Corps, of course. Served my last deployment in Iraq in 2003 as part of the initial push into Iraq. So that was my last deployment, which is crazy to have that as your last deployment. But we were part of the initial push. The Battle of Baghdad was our last fight in April of 2003, and then we did a few other things for a few months, and then came home. And since then, I have been involved in ministry. I was in church ministry for a while and some different things. And for the last 12 years, have been working with the Mighty Oaks Foundation, which is a nonprofit that works with veterans, active duty service members, first responders, and spouses, all dealing with some degree of trauma, whether it's trauma related to combat, trauma related to service in the community for the first responder folks. A lot of it's trauma that was brought into those communities and has been kind of, made worse by their service. And so we've been doing that for 12 years. We've had just over 5,000 students graduate from our programs. And we went from a couple Marines trying to get our friends and other people we knew to come and do this week-long thing that we were doing to now having about 40 weeks of programs in places across the country. So yeah, it's been an adventure to say the least, but really glad to be a part of it.
That's amazing. Now, I want to know, I want to go back a little bit and learn a little bit about Jeremy. So where are you from originally? Why the Marine Corps? Was the military always a thought?
Yeah, it's crazy. And I've thought about this a lot. I've got 4 kids, and my 2 oldest are young adults now, and they're doing their jobs. And I have 2 teenage kids. And so we're having these conversations a lot and have over the last few years about what you're going to do with your future, right? So I think about, man, how did I make those decisions? I was raised in a very conservative home. My dad actually was a pastor of a small church in Southern California. So I was raised in that environment and didn't really have anyone in my family that had served in the military. But when I was probably 11 or 12 years old, I got a book it had been my dad's when he was a kid. He found it in my grandparents' house when he was cleaning out some stuff, gave it to me. So it was, written back in the 60s. But it was stories of Congressional Medal of Honor recipients from World War II. And I remember as an 11 and 12-year-old kid reading, these stories, and they weren't the citations, they were the stories, right? And so reading all the stories and man, like I remember just as a kid for the first time thinking I could be a part of something bigger than myself, and I could do something important. And you learn about honor and you learn about teamwork and all those things. And so that, I think, planted the seed in my mind. And as I got older, I really had my focus was on military service. Why the Marine Corps? I'm not exactly sure. I don't know when it started, but I just grew up believing that if you went into the military, that meant you were going in the Marine Corps. I don't know where I got that from, but that's kind of what I always believed. And
you never played G.I. Joe?
Yeah, I did play G.I. Joe. I like watching war movies, and Marines are pretty cool. And there were a few people in my life that had been Marines, and so that was probably the influence. And I also believed at the time that if you're a Marine, that means you're an infantry Marine, right? Like that's what the Marine Corps is about. I've learned that it's a lot more than that since then. But so I was 14 years old when I told my dad I'd really like to go into the Marine Corps. I want to be an infantry Marine, and that's what I want to do with my life. That's a little surprising for my dad, who was a pastor, to hear from his 14-year-old son, but He said, hey, you can do whatever you want to. You need to go to college first. After that, do whatever you like. And so um, my plan was to enlist out of high school. My parents said you need to go to college. And so I was able to go through a commissioning program while I was in college, and was commissioned the day I graduated. So yeah, it's probably not your typical story. I don't know exactly what started it, but I don't remember ever wanting to do anything else. And that was kind of my whole goal, pointing my life toward that service.
Around what time what year did you enlist?
So I went to officer candidate school in 1996, and I did some reserve time, and then my active duty time, my schooling and all of that started after my commissioning in 99. So yeah, 96, 98, I was going through, the Marine Corps has a program called the Platoon Leaders Course. So you go to officer candidate school. It's kind of a split program. I did that, and then I was commissioned that next year.
So you were fairly fresh in when the 9/11 happened. Do you remember exactly where you were at, or how that, if that had any effect on, what
Yeah.
was going on?
Yeah, man. So when I checked in as a rifle platoon commander, second lieutenant, 6 months later, we deployed to Okinawa for the Marine Corps. It's called a 31st MEU deployment out of Okinawa. And so I did that as a rifle platoon commander. We came home, and that was, I want to say, July of 2001. And so we took our leave, as you do when you come off of a deployment, and we were just back in that requal and all that stuff after deployment. So we were actually on the rifle range just doing our regular rifle quals on 9/11. And that came over the loudspeaker. This happened. And, I was coming out of a peacetime military environment my entire life. We had Desert Storm, which was a pretty big deal, but it was over really quick. Panama kind of happened when I was a teenager. And so there were a few things, but nothing crazy. It was mostly a military peacetime environment. So when they made that announcement, I remember having a Marine come up and say, hey, sir, what does this mean for us? I'm like, it doesn't mean anything for us, right? This is not going to be a big thing. Special forces, somebody's going to take care of this, but we'll never deploy. That Marine found me when we were in Kuwait getting ready to go to Iraq, and reminded me that I said it would never happen. But yeah, I just didn't take it that seriously, I guess, in terms of what that would mean for us. But very, very quickly, within days, our whole world changed. Training changed, uniforms changed, access to equipment and ammunition for live fire training, all of it changed. And we started that spin up to eventually deploy.
That's insane. So you're from California, correct?
Yeah, Southern California. Yep.
And how'd you get to Texas?
Yeah, well, so the Mighty Oaks Foundation, we have grown, and things have happened that put us in a pretty strong place, and we wanted a place to call home. And this area of Texas that we're in, Montgomery County, Texas, is super patriotic and supportive of veterans and all those things. And there's land here, so we can build a building, which we're doing right now. So I actually still live in California.
Okay.
Even though our headquarters is here in Texas, and I kind of commute back and forth, and I travel a lot. But yeah, our team is here in Texas, making it happen.
So your organization is a lot different than a lot of other ones that I've researched and that I've had on the podcast. And one of the things that y'all are real strongly and based is faith.
Yeah.
Now, since your father was a pastor, faith has always been in your life?
Yeah, faith has always been important to me. And, there's an understanding that faith is important, and then there is a realization that it needs to be personal. So growing up around, in a Christian home and around church, and, my whole life has been around church. I was definitely raised in that. I would say that I became a Christian when I was a child, understanding my need for a savior and putting my faith in Christ when I was a child, and growing up in that. And then really owning that, I think, when I was in the Marine Corps, actually, and really understanding that faith is more than just something out there, that it is personal, that it is a relationship, that is something you need to walk out. And So I think there were stages, there are for a lot of people of growth and understanding what all that means. But I became a Christian when I was young, and I really grew into an understanding that I need to live this out when I was in my 20s. And so, yeah, it's always been very important to me. And then, particularly as it relates to the work that we do, when I came home from Iraq, I went to work at a church out of the Marine Corps. I left the Marine Corps, went to work at a church, and the bottom fell out of my life. My marriage found itself in a very dark and difficult place. I was not well at all. And a big part of me, not only not, completely falling, but getting back on my feet and being able to move forward was the faith community around me. And so even understanding trauma and understanding brokenness and understanding hope and purpose and all of that from a faith perspective, that's always been important to me. It was personally important to me when I was struggling. And so it's really, I think, organically, is something that I understand and we're able to help people work through.
So how did the initial idea come about? So
Yeah.
is it something that I know you experienced some difficulty and that was, I'm assuming, the transition from Marine Corps to, I don't want to say, civilian life, but
Yeah.
is that where, you found a lot of the difficulty?
Yeah, for me, the transition from the Marine Corps. So, we were in Iraq, part of the initial push. First KIA of the war, Lieutenant Shane Childers was one of our guys. We were sitting in a blocking position while his platoon was clearing a building. So we were there breaching the burn. We were there for the first objective, securing the first objective. We fought our way to Baghdad. The Battle of Baghdad on April 10th was our battalion as well. I was leading Marines through all of that, and then came home, and literally a month later, I was out of the Marine Corps. And so in that process, and this is 2003, right? So no one was talking about trauma or post-traumatic stress or even transition, really. I mean, there was kind of like a, checking the box process for the transition out, but that's all it was. And there was no conversations about it. There was no access to help or anything like that. So I left the Marine Corps, and in the process of leaving the Marine Corps and literally going onto a church staff, I lost myself. I lost my identity. I didn't know how to function. I didn't know who I was. I felt like what I had been a part of was very important, and the stuff I was doing now was kind of stupid. And it led to this frustration that became anger, that became, I was a disaster at home and even on a church staff. Again, for people that spend time around church, this is not normal. I was a wreck to the point that, my boss, who was the pastor of the church, had to say, this is not working anymore. You either need to find somewhere else to work, or you've got to figure this out, right? And again, we weren't talking about trauma, but you got to figure this out. And so then I was confronted by some people in the church and some family members. And I would say the process of really moving forward and understanding a lot of these things took a long time, but it was about a year that I was able to really engage with, again, purpose and understanding identity and finding hope outside of what I did in the Marine Corps and all of that. So for me, that was my experience. Now, Mighty Oaks started in 2012, so 10 years later, 9 years later. Chad Robichaud and his family, he's also a former Marine, similar, several deployments, came home, post-traumatic stress, all this stuff, bottom fell out of his life, and it was a man in the church that really mentored him back to a place of understanding who he was and how he should live and how he should function as a husband and father and all those things that we talk about. And so he started Mighty Oaks, and we met really 10 years after I got out of the Marine Corps through a mutual friend. And it was one of those, military people are funny because whether you know each other or not, if you have that service in common, right, like you're friends, right away. And we met, and right away he's like, hey man, I need help doing this. Would you help me get this thing going? And the answer was yes. And I had fought through all that kind of alone, personally, with church people and family, but I didn't have like a community of veterans or anything. In fact, I kind of walked away from the veteran community because it was just so hard to be a part of for me. So re-engaging with that, and then reaching out to people that I had served with and people that I was in the Marine Corps with, and then the larger veteran community, I understood, and it took me a long time to get there, but in that process of Mighty Oaks getting started, I understood that it's veterans that have a responsibility to help other people who have served continue moving forward. There are a lot of great people in the world, but if veterans don't take care of each other, then no one else will. And it took me like 10 years to get a hold of that, right? Because I thought that when I brought my guys home from combat, that I did a good job and I was done. But then I realized, like, there's suicides and there's broken homes and there's hopelessness. And so I brought these guys home and then walked out on them and let them fend for themselves. And it was getting Mighty Oaks going that caused me to really step back and go, I still have a responsibility to those guys, and I've got to do everything I can to help them.
That's insane. Just I can just imagine like you going from the Marine Corps to the church.
Right.
It's like a night and day scenario right
there.
It
wasn't a great transition.
That's gotta be, that's gotta be a difficult thing. Did you have, with most veterans that I've experienced and myself, did you have a oh shit moment? Like, okay, there's something wrong here.
So I would say it was about 11 months after I came home is when I had that moment, because I started to, so my behavior was horrible. My wife stayed with me because she loves God and she loved our family and she really wanted it to work, but she probably had a lot of good reasons to leave. I was super angry and just a disaster, right? And then the people I was working with, I was a disaster, but I blamed them. I blamed my wife. I blamed my kids. I blamed the people I worked with. I blamed Americans, right? Like, all of this is someone else's fault. None of this is my fault. And it wasn't until it's like 11 months into this thing when I started to receive confrontation from people that I cared about and that I respected. And that kind of backed me into that place where I had to go, shoot, man, like, I guess I'm the problem. I've been blaming everyone else. I've been saying that everyone else is the problem. I've been saying that, no one knows who I am. No one knows how special I am. All the stupid stuff we say. I'll never be what I was over there. Maybe I should go back in the Marine Corps. All that stuff I was telling myself, and then taking it out on everyone else. When people that I really cared about finally confronted me, that was the moment I had to step back and go, oh no, I've had this wrong, and I've hurt quite a few people in the process.
So what was the recovery like? What was the first thing that you I know it's, mind, body, soul. Is it you just have to redo your faith structure, or what was a lot of it?
The big key for me. So it's important for people to understand that I think working through that, whether you call it healing or recovery or just working through it, however you want to phrase it, it takes time, right? And everyone thinks that it's like you make a decision and now everything's different. Well, I spent a year destroying every relationship that was important to me. So I wasn't going to turn that around in a year or in a moment. And then just trying to figure all this out. But what started it for me was accepting responsibility. And it sounds too simple, but I couldn't be responsible for a lot of things, but I had to be fully responsible for myself, how I behaved, how I was treating people, how I was looking at people, the things that I was thinking. I had to be responsible for that. And we have a guy in our program who says, look, if you're only 10% responsible for what's happened to you, then you need to be 100% responsible for that 10%, right? And that was me. I looked at everyone else. I'm like, well, you guys just don't get it. You're the problem. The confrontation caused me to say, I'm the problem. And if any of this is going to get better, it's going to be because I'm willing to accept responsibility for how I've been behaving and the things that I've been doing. I like to say that there's no excuse for bad behavior. We might have reasons, and a lot of veterans have reasons, and then they use that as the excuse. There may be reasons, but there's no excuse. And all of us know you're not out of control until you're out of control. There are moments before you lose control that you can stop that thing from rolling downhill. And yet we use these circumstances or situations or our trauma or our hurt to justify our bad behavior. And I had to be responsible for that. So really it was me accepting responsibility personally and then apologizing to the people that I'd hurt, basically my wife, the people I worked with, my family, the people who were close to me, and letting them know I'm acknowledging this, I'm accepting responsibility for it. And then walking it out. It took me, my wife would say, I always say it took me about a year. My wife would say, and does say, it took me about 10 years to really get all that back. And someone asked me about that not too long ago, and they said, well, when you came to that realization, did you go to counseling? I should have is the answer. And if I had sought out a counselor and I had been honest about a lot of the stuff that was going on in my heart, it wouldn't have taken 10 years. But I didn't until much later. And so I worked through that kind of on my own by standing up and trying to make it look like I had it figured out. I had accepted responsibility. For me, I started reading books and listening to things and talking to people and trying to internalize that, but doing it on my own. And it wasn't until much, much later that I brought other people into that conversation. And that's when I was able to really start experiencing true healing, if you will, or, really getting to a place where I was moving forward in a real way, other than just kind of fighting through it.
Right. Now, it's crazy because I've noticed that about a lot of us. It's when it comes to, we like to keep our own personal battles to ourselves, but
right.
we preach to others. Hey, tell us what's going on. Tell us,
Yeah, it's exactly right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
easier.
We say battle buddy. We say all this stuff,
Yeah.
and like, you need to be honest and transparent and whatever, but we're not any of those things, right? So we're like, yeah, we're really good at preaching, but really bad at receiving. And
Yeah.
I mean, that was definitely me. And I can see this in hindsight, but if a year into that thing, I said, look, I've got a problem. I'm accepting responsibility and I need to sit down and actually get help from someone and bring some other people into my life. It would have been much better for everyone, but it did take longer because it was more than 10 years before I was willing to sit down and actually tell someone, like, I'm really hurting and I'm having problems and I know it and I don't know how to get forward or move forward from here.
No, that it all makes sense. It sounds like something, it sounds familiar. It's
Yeah.
It's something that I've done myself, so I know what you mean by that. So with the Mighty Oaks Foundation, okay, so y'all have locations all over the United States?
We do. Again, we've been blessed with some great partners, and so we don't currently own. We own property for our offices and that kind of thing, but we don't own a facility that we do our program on. We have 5 different locations across the country: California, Texas, Ohio, and Virginia. 2 of those are in Texas, and they're folks who have either like retreat centers, those kind of. It's a great setting. It's kind of like a ranch setting. Think of that in each one of those locations, and they give us exclusive use to it. So we've had some great partners come along, folks who love veterans and want to serve. And so we run our programs. It's a week long in one of those locations across the country, and we bring folks to us. So it's pretty neat. Yeah, it's pretty neat.
And there's so many different communities and state out there, different states that care about our veterans and our first responders. And maybe I'm partial because Texas is my home state, but I honestly want to say that Texas is one of the best.
If Texas had California weather and geography, it'd be a great state.
Hey, but you're right. I'm not gonna lie on that. You're right. But when it comes to treating our veterans,
Texas is great about treating veterans right, and I mean that's why we made the decision to settle here. So we had our headquarters in California, and it was great. California, has a lot of problems. I'm not going to argue that, but more veterans in California than anywhere else in the country. And, Californians, particularly where we were near Camp Pendleton, generally pretty supportive of veterans. But as a state, for sure, Texas is definitely pro-military and pro-veteran, which is great.
So what is your current position at the foundation currently?
Yeah, I'm the CEO. So oversee the kind of the operations of what we do. We've got an incredible team. We've got a great programs team that runs all those programs, and then our admin teams, and we've got some incredible employees that make it happen. So my job is to pretend like I'm in charge of everything, to take credit, but but also to know that all the work is done by people who are much more capable than me. So we've been blessed, man. We've grown from just two guys trying to make it happen to a national organization that has thousands of folks every year go through what we do.
Man, congratulations on that. It looks like y'all are doing an amazing thing, and I'm sure you are doing amazing things. I didn't mean to say it looks like you.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you also an author?
Yeah, I've written a number of books. We have produced some resources for kind of the work that we do. A lot of the folks that we talk to. So a book on post-traumatic stress disorder, a book on resiliency, and a book recently that just came out on suicide, and what we can do about that. We try to write all of those books from the perspective not of there is a problem, because we know there's a problem, but how do we address the problem? And so that's what those resources are for. On our website, they're free downloads. So we just want people to have those. And then I've written a couple of other books. I wrote a book about my time in Iraq called March or Die, and stories from when I was in Iraq, and then making application to life. What did we learn here that we can carry out through our lives? And then I wrote a book on leadership a number of years ago too. So it's, your voice is only so big and can only get to so many people. And so you try to produce resources that will allow people to get the help that they need.
No, that makes sense. What was your initial push to do your first book?
So the first one was that book, March or Die. And I had, I want to say it was on the 10th anniversary of going into Iraq, that I just started to write some things down. And I look at most events in life and try to go, okay, what are the lessons that can be distilled, right? I'm a big, what are the 10 things kind of person. And so
right.
I started to think about some of the times that we had and some of the things that we did and some of the specific events that took place when we were in Iraq, and then started to ask, what are the lessons that I can learn from that? So this is for me personally. And then again, I think it was on the 10th anniversary, I just did a blog post. I had a personal blog, did a blog post about some of those things, and just posted it. And a lot of the guys that I had served with got a hold of it and started sending it around, and it was received really well. And then someone said, you should put this in a book. And so I did. And mostly it was for me and just, anyone that I would benefit from it, which I thought would be the guys I served with and me, and that was it. So telling a story of something that happened in Iraq, and then, the second part of that is, and here's the lesson, and lining that out. And so there's 12 lessons in the book. And it did really well, and it resonated with a lot of people. So that was the first one. Is very personal. And then the second one was a leadership book. I learned leadership in the Marine Corps. Then I learned leadership in the ministry, and they didn't really connect. And so I had to ask myself,
different approach, right?
Yeah, different approaches. So what is leadership fundamentally, right? Not how do you do it, but what is it? It's not this and it's not that. But there has to be something that is leadership. What is it? And so again, as a project to help me understand it, I wrote that book, and tried to come to some definitions and some ideas about what real leadership looks like in any environment. And that was a help to me, and some other folks who found it helpful as well. So I write, when I've written, it's all been pretty personal. I've been taught so many things by so many people. I've been in ministry a long time, but I never went to college for ministry. So what I've learned has been people sharing their stories with me and reading books and trying to learn from the experiences of others. And so when I write, it really is just about, I've learned this and I want to share it with you. And so that seems to be the best way to communicate with other people.
What was your original degree in?
Criminal justice.
Oh, wow. You kind of went everywhere with that, right?
Yeah, I figured if the Marine Corps doesn't work out, then I'll go into law enforcement. That was my whole thought. My parents said, you have to go to college. and I didn't want to. I didn't do great in high school. I knew I wasn't going to do great in college.
Right.
Um, and so I'm like, well, if I have to be there, I wouldn't mind studying criminal justice for 4 years, and maybe I'll become a police officer someday.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I did. And then over the years, I've started uh, college again several times. I just haven't finished because I feel like I'm always involved in the work, and I don't have time to get the degree. So
Yeah.
um,
I think
yeah,
I'm on six. I think I'm on six startovers right now. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I have six, but I'm pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Hey,
like one class into a lot of programs.
oh yeah, life happens, man. It gets
Yeah,
it gets
life
it gets crazy.
life happens.
Um, so you do a lot of motivational speaking, correct?
Yeah, again, that's born out of our experience here at Mighty Oaks and talking to people about resiliency and about moving forward and hope and all those topics. Uh, approaching those from a faith perspective, and then just kind of my own journey and some of the things that I've learned personally and trying to communicate that with other people. Yeah, it kind of the whole principle that what we do is built on is, and this is why it works, I think, for veterans. It's not a professional talking down to other people. It's us going, hey, I know where you've been because I've been there. I've experienced what you've experienced or something similar. I don't have it all figured out, but I have learned a few things. I'm a few steps further down the road than you, and I want to take you with me. And so whether it's writing or speaking or teaching or whatever, that's it, man. I've learned some things and I want to share it with you, and you can move forward. And I know that because I've been able to move forward, and I want to help you do the same.
And it's a whole different approach
It's different.
when you're
Yeah.
receiving advice from someone who's been there and done that.
Yeah.
If I gave you advice and everything I learned was in a textbook is
Right.
totally different than what I've
Right.
experienced.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons that what we do at Mighty Oaks works, because when someone comes to one of our programs, right? It's 5 days long, and veterans are super cynical and don't want to listen to anyone, right? But when they come to our program, they're sitting in a room full of other veterans or active duty service members. And the person standing in front of them, everyone who works for us came through our program as a student. And then we brought them through this year-long leadership training program. And so everyone in the room has a shared background. It's probably not exactly the same, but similar background. And so there's no walls, right? Like, kick the walls
Right.
down.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. Nobody here is going to thank you for your service, right? Nobody cares because
Yeah.
we're all exactly the same. So let's just get busy, and we just want to help you move forward because we had some people help us move forward, and we just want to help you do the same. And yeah, the approach is so different but so effective.
Right. Yeah, that's I understand.
Yeah.
Jeez. Hey, with everything that you have going on in your life, Mighty Oats, speaking engagements, book writing, how do you got time for jujitsu, man?
Well, if anything goes, it's the jujitsu. What's funny? So my son, he's a police officer now, my oldest son. Um, when he was like 11 years old, he said he wanted to be a police officer, and he was like a fat little 11-year-old kid, right? He loved video games and staying inside. That was his whole thing. And I'm like, look, man, you're never going to be a professional athlete. So I want you to learn something, and I want you to get involved in something physical that will be a skill you can take with you. And you want to be in law enforcement someday. He was a little kid. You want to be in law enforcement someday. You need to learn, these types of skills. And so we got him into a jiu-jitsu gym, and he loved it. I mean, just took to it, and he would stay. I mean, we'd drop him off some days, and he'd stay there for 4 hours worth of classes,
Oh, wow.
and he would just
Yeah.
loved it. Well, 11, 12, 13 years old, he's getting bigger, and jiu-jitsu is a thing that if you learn the technique, you can deal with somebody bigger than you. So it got to the point where I'm like, we're wrestling around in the house, and one day we're wrestling around in the house. He's like 13 maybe, and he took my back. I didn't know jiu-jitsu. I just kind of wrestled a little bit. He took my back, and I thought he was going to put me out. And I think the next day I went and signed up for a class because I'm like, this kid, man, he is not going to take me out. So I started jiu-jitsu because that's where he was, and then eventually all of my kids are trained, and most of them still do. And so, they're there all the time, and I wanted to be with them, and so I started training with them, and yeah, so it's kind of a family thing. It
That's
is
awesome.
harder. It's harder when you're on the road, but I get in there when I can.
That's got to be amazing. Bonding,
Yeah.
event for the family. I mean, that, hey, you made your brother mad. Now go choke him out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife hates it because my boys think it's fun to, grapple with her when she doesn't
Yeah.
want to be grappled with.
Oh, yeah.
They're pummeling underhooks in the kitchen, but it has been great, and it has given us a common ground. Uh, I could talk about jujitsu for a while, but I think jujitsu is a very important skill for kids. I think it teaches them a lot of really important lessons just that they can apply to their lives. But as a family, it's been great because we're there together. We're doing the thing together. Um, you're learning together. It's been great for us. And me and my boy, I have 2 girls and 2 boys, and my girls have both trained. My boys still both train, and it's been the best bonding thing I could have with my sons.
Did any of your kids ever express interest about joining the service?
My son, who is a police officer, at one time had talked about the Marine Corps, maybe a reservist or something. So he talked about it, but then kind of the steps to becoming a police officer started unfolding, and so he just pursued that. My 14-year-old, he's my youngest, wants to be a paramedic, and he is very focused on, I want to be a paramedic eventually, but I'd like to go into the military to get my medical training. So he wants to be a corpsman. Now, again, he's 14. We'll see how that all shakes out, right? But yeah, I mean, he's as focused as a 14-year-old can be on going into the Navy and becoming a corpsman. So we'll see what happens there.
That's incredible, man. You're raising a bunch of superheroes for
Yeah, I
sure.
don't know about that. I need to tone down the military rhetoric, apparently, because I'm like, why do you want to go in the military? He's like, because you talk about it every day. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess it's my fault.
Yeah. But nah, I mean, and your girls, what are they doing?
Yeah, my
If you don't, I didn't mean to get too personal. I was
no,
just
that's all right. No, so on the other end of the spectrum, my oldest, she's 24, is an accountant. So
oh wow.
I have an accountant and a police officer, and then I have a 16-year-old daughter. She's in high school. She wants to be a nurse, and then my 14-year-old wants to be a paramedic. So yeah,
Oh,
they're kind of all over
hey,
the place. But
you're just missing a lawyer in there. You got the whole family, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
no kidding.
That's awesome, man. That's amazing. What do you have what do you have on your schedule the next few months? Any events you got coming up?
We've got a few speaking events. Man, off the top of my head, I know they're coming up, but
Nah,
those are all excuse me, on our website, and the Mighty Oak social media keeps that updated too. So if someone is in an area, they can find us, and we're always involved in something. Yeah.
so I was gonna ask you, so out of everybody in your life that you've met, who has been your biggest influence on your life? Your father, correct? Is that what I
Yeah.
think you had said it earlier.
Yeah, my dad definitely, if there's one person, there have been a lot of great influences on my life. If there's one person, it would be my dad. Um, from the time I was very young until, I mean, last night, I've been going through a few things recently, and still my dad, is the one I call and talk to, and walks me through that, and has always been that person. I've been really blessed to have just some incredible people in my life. So, I mean, my dad, obviously, huge kind of oversized influence in my life, but um, military leaders. I mean, some of the folks that I worked for when I was in the Marine Corps over 20 years ago still keep in touch with me, and still, I would say, influence me. And some of that's influence that they had when I was at that kind of moldable stage of life, and some of it has been just over the years they've helped me. Friends and other people that have come into my life. I've been very blessed to have the right people in my life, and I don't know where I learned it or where I was taught it, but the one thing that I have always respected, I guess, and I haven't always sought it out, but have always respected, is when people speak into your life, you need to listen, right? And so, again, I mentioned this earlier. I did a terrible job seeking that out, but when those people have come into my life, I've thankfully listened and learned an awful lot. So a lot of good people.
That's awesome. Give us what is something that you wish you would have known 10 years ago?
Oh, 10 years ago. There's so many things I wish I would have known 10 years ago. I think one thing that I wish I would have known 10 years ago, and I continue to learn now, is what I just talked about. You need to surround yourself with the right people, not just people, but the right people. You need to have people in your life that you can influence. You need to have people in your life, that you're working to influence. And then you need to have people in your life that can speak into your life, that are influencing you. One of the conversations that I seem to have often is this idea of, we call it mentorship. It's called different things, but there need to be some people in your life that care about you, but are not emotionally invested in the decisions that you make. This is something that I've been really growing into. So people that care about you, but if you shipwreck your life, it's not going to shipwreck their life, right? So my wife cares about me, my kids care about me, my family cares about me, but if I blow up, they blow up too.
Right.
And so they have an emotional, very vested interest in the stuff I do, which means it's hard for them to look at it from kind of the outsider's perspective. I need somebody that can look at my life and speak the truth, because whatever I do will have no impact. I mean, they care about you, but it's not going to change their life. And so finding those people, it can be tough, but you need that person. I care about you. I want you to do the right thing, but I don't have a vested, emotional interest in whether or not you do the right thing. And so I can give you an objective outsider's view. That has become more and more important to me over the years.
That makes a lot of sense. Someone to speak into your life. I like that. Yeah, that's amazing. So just a couple more questions, man. I'm gonna get out of your hair. Hey, do you have a bucket list?
A bucket list. I have. I've never had a bucket list, but I started a few years ago running ultra marathons, and
What's an ultra marathon?
So an ultra marathon, it can be a lot of different things, but it's a race longer than a marathon. A marathon is 26.2 miles. So it's anything longer than that would be considered ultra, right? It's beyond the 26.2. So one of the things that I'd always wanted to do, I've been a runner since I was a little kid, and I've never liked it. I've never enjoyed it, but I'm built like a runner, and it's something that's always been a part of my health regimen, right? So I started hearing about people who did these ultra marathons, and so one thing I always wanted to do is kind of run a long race like that. And so I think 4 years ago now, I signed up for 50K, which is 32 miles, 31 and a half miles. And that was kind of the thing I was going to do. And I did that. And then, like a lot of things, man, it got out of control. So I did that. I did a bunch of those. I did 100K. I did a 100-miler last year. So I've got a few races. I got a few races on my bucket list, I guess, that I'd like to do before I die. But it just gives me something to pursue and to stay healthy for. But nothing. I'm really thankful for the life I've been able to live, and I want to keep adding meaning and value to people's lives. But I don't have any big things other than, stuff like that, I guess.
Hey, would yourself at 12 years old think that you were cool right now?
Well, I have 2 teenage kids, and they don't think I'm cool at all. So no, I don't think so. I don't think so, man. It's hard when you're that age to think someone like me is cool.
Yeah.
I have a complex, actually, because my teenagers are relentless. But yeah, no, I don't think they'd think I was cool. I hope I hope a 12-year-old me would be proud of me right now.
Yeah.
But no, I think they think I have some real problems with, dressing and the way I talk and the time I go to bed and things like that.
Man, my girls, man, they let me have it. They,
Yeah.
they're
It's abusive. It's abusive.
It is. It is. And hey, we'll be at church and I grab a second donut. My little one will look at me and be like, "Dad, you think you need that?" Yeah. I'm like, "Hey, you better get out of here."
Yeah, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's funny.
What is the worst advice you ever received in your life?
The worst advice?
The worst advice.
I think the worst advice that I ever received, that anyone can receive, is follow your heart. Do what makes you happy. I believe in being happy. I believe in experiencing joy and doing those things. But if we set as the objective of our life pursuing our heart, which is entirely selfish and entirely self-serving and entirely about us, then we're going to hurt a lot of people, and eventually we won't be happy, even though we're following our heart. do whatever you have to be happy. Again, that's so self-centered and self-focused. And I think a life well lived is a life that's lived for others. And I think when you get to the end of your life, what will bring you peace and happiness and contentment is knowing that you didn't get it right all of the time, but that you did what you could with the resources that you had to be a blessing to other people, to encourage other people, to help other people. And so this silly notion that you need to follow your heart or whatever, it's just to say we need to follow what makes us emotionally satisfied is just terrible advice. And a lot of people pursue that and end up in some very dark places or very alone.
I've never heard it said that way, and that was absolutely amazing. Jesus, you just got me thinking about some approaches that I take. Yeah.
Just trying to make you think. Just trying to make you think.
You definitely did. Okay, on the other side, what is the best advice you ever received?
I mean, I think the best advice I've ever received is live for other people. Again, I don't remember a person giving me that advice, but the people that I've always looked up to in my life and the leaders that I respect are people who lived for the benefit of other people. And I think that's the best advice any of us could give. I believe that God equips us all differently. He gives us all different resources and opportunities and all of those things. But I think we are given the opportunities, the resources, the skills, the talents, all that stuff. I think we're given all of that, not for our own benefit, but to be a benefit to other people. And so the best advice I could give is use what God's given you to bless other people, to be a benefit to other people.
Wow. Dang. That was perfectly answered. I have you left me at a speechless moment, and that doesn't happen very often. So,
well, I'm glad I could help.
Hey, did you have any closing comments? Anything you'd like to say?
Man, the only thing I'd like to say, other than thank you, and I'm really appreciative of the opportunity, is for anyone interested in what we do, just visit our website and know this: there's no cost to the programs that we offer, and even the cost of travel, we cover that, so we can help you get to where you need to be to get that help. So it's free to you. Now, it's not free. We work hard to raise that money, but we want to make it possible for anyone who needs help to get it. So go to our website, mightyoaksprograms.org, and to fill out the application, and we'll take care of the rest.
Jeremy, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you for jumping on the show and chatting with me a little bit. I'm going to share your information so people can reach out. Not your information, but how to reach you.
Yeah, perfect.
Hey, again, thank you for joining me on the show, man. I really
thank you, man. It's awesome. Thank you.
We'll talk to you later. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Know that we love you, and we're always here if you need anything. If you are a friend or in crisis, please dial 988, or you can actually text 988. If you're a military veteran, press 1. As always, you guys, thank you for tuning in the show. And Charlie, Mike,